Hello, you're watching TelecomTV. My name is Martin Warwick and I'm talking with Recep Ozdag, who is Director of Marketing with Cyan. Recep, you're very welcome. What's Cyan doing here?
Cyan is illustrating our end-to-end SDN and NFV service orchestration software, in particular a virtual EPC deployment. So we provision the eNode B, the network interface devices, mobile backhaul, data center resources, and use a cloud management system to operationalize it in a telco environment.
Are you predominantly involved with SDN, or are you involved in NFV network functions virtualization as well?
So we're at a place where these two come together. We do not provide the virtual network functions ourselves. So we're agnostic to that, and we're hardware agnostic as well as network function agnostic. But what we do is we work with all these providers of network functions to operationalize them in an actual system. And this is where SDN and NFV come together, because NFV is a particular solution, but you have to tie it with SDN to operationalize it in a multi-vendor environment.
For those of us who are not in this particular part of the industry, SDN seems to have burst up onto the stage almost fully formed within the past sort of 18 months or so. But in fact, work on SDN, or what is now SDN, was in place well before that. And what we're finally seeing after 8, maybe even 10 years is a change from theory to practice, from hype to reality. How real is it now?
That's a good question. And I think it really depends on which area that you're looking at. For Cyan, especially in the wide area network where we provide ELAN and E-line services, it is actually very real and it's been deployed. And recently there was a big announcement with Colt last year where they use our software to provision services using a multi-vendor approach. Essentially, we're provisioning devices that do not belong to Cyan. Right? So that is very real. Now, if you move on to virtual network function deployment and using SDN there, I think that is still in trial phases. So in the WAN, it's real, but when you bring in virtual network function virtualization and automating using SDN, it's still in the trial phase.
There's a lot being said, Recep, about the fact that this particular initiative for use of SDN and NFV is being pushed and led by the service providers themselves rather than the manufacturers and the vendors, as would have been the case hitherto. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with that, and what effect is it having upon the way in which Cyan operates?
It is pushed by the operators, and it makes sense, right? So the revenue is not increasing as quickly as the costs are, and this means that they have to take advantage of the agility that comes with cloud computing, right? And that means, and what software is great at being provisioned, scaling up and down. So that is essentially the solution, because you can't really scale up and down hardware. You have to approach it for peak throughput, and if it's not used, well, it's not used. Whereas providing the same functionality in software in general purpose data centers or computers, so many benefits. Because we are not a network function provider, we don't really have any resistance to this. In fact, we really are a big supporter of this, because now we're going through a different model of having hardware that is being placed in and is static to a more dynamic environment. And in dynamic environment, we need to provide orchestration. So that is great for us. But I can definitely see some resistance, especially on the legacy hardware manufacturers, in terms of going to this model. But I think it's just more about adapting their business models.
Much has also been made of the fact that this is based upon open systems, open values, etc., etc. How open is open, and how standard is standard?
The reason for openness is pretty clear. We're going from, there's this change happening, we're going from hardware boxes to software, but also we don't want to be tied into, you can still be tied into a vertically integrated solution that is not open. So we're very used to openness from the PC model. You can use any processor, any component in this insulated approach. So the same should happen with SDN and NFV for the network and end-to-end services. But is standard bodies the right way? That's questionable. but what we're really seeing is that, especially with the advocacy of ETSI, where multiple vendors as well as with the sponsorship of users come together and try to create a framework with these proof of concepts, there they can essentially try to see what works and what doesn't. Because what seems to work on paper, using a particular API, particular open environment, may not necessarily translate into the best solution or the most scalable solution or really the open solution in real life. So the ETSI PoCs are a good way to go to this route. The second approach really is open source. There are, open source in general is very successful. There are failed open source attempts too. But the one advantage of open source is that it becomes the standard. Therefore, whatever open source technology tends to win or have momentum behind it automatically defines the APIs that everybody gathers around, and that doesn't need a particular standards body. It's just a number of, it could be vendors, could be just general users contributing, and the great brains and minds thinking and coming up with a solution that defines that open source solution. And that is, I think, in my opinion, really will define the open APIs that everybody will adopt.
Great stuff. Recep Ozdag, thank you very much indeed.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.